Are we on TV?
You are on TV.
Sweet. So the thing we wrote is called Foreman, and it's a job queuing plugin for Rails. And why would you write it? Because you have a lot of stuff you want to do in the background. Like we always say, you want to like scale images or encode video or something like that. But if you're going to do stuff in the background, why not use Background.rb, which is sort of the most visible thing for this kind of crap in Rails. And the big things we came up against are there's no way to gracefully restart. Meaning, like, if you have a long-running job that's going on that can take hours, and you want to restart it or deploy in code, you got to kill that or wait. There's also no like easy out-of-the-box way to spread to multiple machines, and there's no execution history. But other than that, it's pretty awesome. And that guy Ezra's pretty smart, although he doesn't seem to work on it that much. So the big picture, how the project is organized, the three main classes are, you have a job, which is an active record base model, which represents something to do at a point in time. A worker, which is a standalone process that wants to run jobs, and a manager that puts them together. That's supposed to be a one-month object. I didn't put Bill Murray in it, but in that time. So job, that class. So it keeps execution history, state, stuff like is it scheduled or executing or finished or failed. And when a job runs, what it actually runs is a method from a class called a job set, which is just sort of a simple class that organizes all the stuff you would want to do with Foreman. It just executes one method that is sort of analogous to like a controller action. We would hope in theory it would be very simple, like a couple of lines, it would just call something on a model. Here's an example of a job set. So that first method job below, anything that's actually going to be run as a job is prepended by job underscore. We're not in love with any of this, by the way, so if you guys dislike parts of it, we'd love feedback. You can give it regular arguments like Ruby, which is actually sort of an annoying thing about Background.rb. There's a different job nap, and then that last method would just be analogous to like a helper, anything you'd call in multiple jobs you don't want to be executed directly. So the worker class is a single process running a DRB server. When a worker's busy, it's running just one job, and when it's not, it just sits there waiting for something to do it. It's really dumb.
Like it doesn't talk to the database at all.
Yeah, it doesn't interact. It doesn't it doesn't look for a job or anything to do. It just sits there waiting to be told what to do.
So does each worker have the full Rails environment loaded inside it?
We have the option of one with and without if you don't want to have a 22 megabyte process.
I don't know if you can actually write jobs right now that.
Yeah, we're not saying that totally works.
It does work because I would turn it on and off.
Yeah, it's maybe a little flakier than some other parts.
I can't remember if you can actually specify a job that uses.
Yeah,
you can start up workers.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there.
And they're like 2 megabytes instead.
But yeah.
The manager is sort of the more complicated part. It's a single process running a DRB server. Keeps an eye on the queue of jobs, keeps an eye on its stable of workers, and hands out jobs to workers that aren't busy. So here's sort of the life cycle of a job. That job has a little corona around because it's new. That's what it's about. The job is a status of scheduled. You got a worker over there that's ready. So the manager says, oh, I found a scheduled job. And it sets the job status to running and hands it to the worker, which becomes busy. The worker does its crap and says, all right, I'm done, tells the manager. The manager says, okay, Mr. Job, your status is finished, and the worker goes back to ready state, lather, rinse, repeat.
And the manager right there is actually updating the jobs table, like in the database.
And we sort of played around with doing it in SQLite if you didn't want to pollute your Rails project's table space, but
it works.
It works. We're
not sure
we
really what people want. I mean, we're developing. We want to actually be able to look at it.
Yeah, we want to be able to like play with the and stuff and query that from within. So this is what it would look like on a machine. You have a table full of jobs. You have a manager process and a whole bunch of workers. And one of the reasons that we wanted to write this is if you're doing stuff, especially like transcoding video or something, it wouldn't take you that long, that heavy a workload to overload that single machine. And because managers and workers are just these separate processes that talk to each other using DRB over TCP/IP, it's really easy to just add another machine with a bunch of workers on it. Those white boxes represent separate computers. And the manager doesn't give a shit where the workers are, and the workers don't really care where the managers are. They just talk to each other. As long as they can communicate, everything's happening.
Do you have to point the manager to each new machine that comes up?
Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but basically the manager has a fixed location in the config file, so the workers can always find it.
Got it.
So to show you what it sort of looks like when you do it, we wrote, so to go back to the example of this job set, like if I wanted to run, like say this was actually useful instead of stupid, if I wanted to run these, we have sort of two different methods. The first, especially while you're developing, you don't really want to have to start up Foreman or deal with it at all. Like Background.rb has a console if you want to run a worker. But we just wrote a little harness called trun for test run. And I just tell it, you're going to run the test job set, and the command you're going to run is hello, and then it requires 2 arguments, and it runs it. And it's I mean, you can imagine how dumb that script is. It's just loading this class and then running that method, like just sticking the arguments
Everybody
in.
can see it's this one right here.
Yeah,
That's the thing that he just ran.
So this is trun's output here saying I initialize that job set, and I'm running this crap with these arguments, and this is the output from the job set, and then it says it's done.
And you can see also where, job hello, I think you might have mentioned it, but job, you see hello right there, but it's actually defined as job hello.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the test job set up there, it's just, you chop off the job set when you want to do it, when you want to actually run it.
But
And
if-
also,
Oh, yeah, go on.
also go back to, it doesn't matter, but basically that T-run right there is, I think you mentioned it, is totally outside of, like, there's no manager running, there's no workers running, this is just
It
running.
has nothing to do with DRV or any of that crap, or a database or anything.
Yeah, and if you want, you can call these from within Ruby too. You can start
Yeah,
up
you
the
can
console
instantiate your test job
Yeah.
set and just run the method.
and just
That's
run it.
something different.
There's no, like in Background.rb, it's inheriting from, is it Rails base or something? Rails. So it's a little weird. And I think you were trying to run tests or something, and just running in the problems matter.
Yeah, like if you wanted to unit test this or spec it or whatever, it's no harder than any other way.
And in your demo, it extends from application job set.
Oh yeah, we just did that so that by default when you install a plugin, it creates an application job set.
Okay.
So if you had any shared functionality, you want all your job sets to
But
set
there's
up.
nothing.
There's not. I think there's a hello world in there. It's pretty much empty. And also, like we're gonna have a lot of different job sets to cover a lot of different functionality. But if you have one thing to do, you can just write one method in application job set.
Right.
Not paying. And actually, trun if you don't specify a job set name, it assumes application.
Or you could put like helper methods in there. It's analogous to like application control. So
Yeah, is how we thought of it. And so if you wanted to actually do this, like run Foreman, this is how you sort of do it. So we installed the plugin in Vendor.
Before you should clear that, and you should also do this log.
I did. Oh no, the log thing.
For
Yeah, I'll do
workers,
that. Oops.
Hey.
Hey.
Alright. Any chairs?
Oh wait, one. Wow, the food.
Yeah, how'd you do that? Help yourself.
Yeah, there's cheese right here.
What are we celebrating?
Ruby!
Ruby.
Oh, cool.
Good, you take that one.
Oh, so we wanted to start this whole thing up. There's an init script Foreman start. Whoops. What did I do?
I don't know.
Start. Did you break it?
I didn't break it.
Yeah, you broke it.
I didn't break it.
You broke it.
Is
Say
that
agent
SQL?
already
Do you need
running.
the
How do you
name
get
the
free
server?
Oh, agent already running. You have to stop it. So do a hard stop.
I checked it. Did it?
Do
See, it's acting a
a
little weird.
stop. Stop.
Oh.
So yeah.
It's still
Wait,
saying
what are you gonna-
age stop.
Yes, that's what I put for me.
Nope. Is it writing a pin somewhere?
It's in, yeah. Foreman. No, where is it? Temp? Is it inside PLS temp? Sorry guys.
No, it's alright.
Foreman. Temp Foreman.
It's
Remember that shit.
In theory, the end script will not be so dumb. Okay, so when you tell it to start, it starts a manager and starts a couple of workers for you. And over here, I'm tailing the manager's log. So you can sort of see what it does. It starts up and it says, I have no workers, I have nothing to do. And that's good because I got nobody to do anything with it. And it basically just runs this in a thread in a loop, looking for workers to do stuff and jobs to do. But then every 30 seconds, the workers are hardwired to heartbeat in to the manager, just to be like, hi. And then the manager says, oh, I've never seen you before, and it adds it to its list of workers. So, you know, not rocket science. So now there's 2 workers and nothing to do, but 2 workers ready to do them. So I'm going to pause that. And it'll just keep chugging along. So if we want to see it do something, we can make a job. And we'll say, you're going to run nap.
And just to iterate again, the test right there that you see where it says job set
Yeah, it
test
goes
is the
to
class,
job set.
and the command is basically the method.
This is going to run nap, which sleeps for 100 seconds, so that'll be fun to watch. So we're just creating an active record model, and you can see it on here. It found something to do, and it's a good thing it has 2 workers ready to do it, and then it goes through its little dance of saying, we're going to assign that job to this worker. DRuby, when DRuby URIs, their addresses look like this, basically, so each worker is just referenced by its URI. And Jason will go over DRuby in a second, if anybody isn't familiar with it. And that's pretty much it. And then, so it's just sleeping.
Oh, you want to open the worker one?
Yeah. In the real, when you're running, so when you run trun, it just sticks everything to standard out, but when you run Foreman for reals, it'll log each job to a file for you. So you can see the output of this job that's running. Basically, the job just says good night and then sleeps for 100 seconds and then wakes up again. So we'll probably wait another 20 seconds. You'll see it wake up and you'll see the worker then phone home to the manager saying, I'm done. And the manager will be like, cool. We gotta wait. So
Is it unpaused at the bottom?
yeah, I think.
Oh, it should still be there, yeah.
What kind of real-world application do you have? Feel free to interrupt anytime it moves, but do you have in mind when you're building this?
Well, one of the things that we use it for is processing images. You know, like if you're like scraping like a web page or something like that, you have a bunch of images that you want to like I don't know, resize or something, or if you're doing video stuff, maybe we don't, you know, well, yeah. So like, there, finished.
Oh yeah, so it finished and you can see it here.
Anything that basically takes a long time that you don't want the web server to wait around to finish up doing.
Okay.
We could add in scheduling stuff. Background.rb does that. We haven't really thought about how we want to do that, if we want to do that, you know.
Basically stuff that's like resource intensive that can easily be divided up into different machines.
Yeah, especially any sort of long running computationally intensive tasks that you want to spread around. And especially that you don't care about like exactly where it is, mostly whether it's working or not, like whether it's done or not. If you don't care any deeper than that, this project's pretty great. So the worker said reported back and said it's done. And you can see here before in the little loop before that it said it had 2 workers and nothing to do, but only one of those 2 workers wasn't busy. But then this one phoned home and now it has both and they're both ready. That's it. Oh, then you can see it sort of do its queuing behavior. If you just like just schedule 10 jobs, you can see it be like, woo! Now I've got a whole bunch of shit to do. And it doles out 2 and it'll be unbelievably boring. take forever for that to sleep for 100 seconds.
But you can see it there, yeah, it's got 8 leftover jobs that are still waiting.
And so this doesn't do any like automatic management of being like, well, I have a ton of stuff to do, not a lot of workers, because we're more afraid of overloading a machine.
Can you spawn new workers right now if you wanted to?
Yeah, the init script could. Does that work, Jason? Actually?
We'd have to change, right now that we'd have to change the config file to allow more workers. Basically you, well, it's set up to start 2 workers. I don't think the init script allows you to
Anyway,
start.
it will. Like right now, if you're like, well, I got a ton of crap to do and the machine's mostly idle, yeah, you can tell the init script to start more.
So yeah, the init script will start up like a certain default number. Like right now we have it set for 2 for the demonstration.
Yeah.
I think 20 is probably a reasonable amount for Rails workers. You know,
Because you
workers
just start
that load.
sucking crazy amounts of RAM by loading it.
Yeah.
It's like, that'd be like having 20 mods.
So does each worker load the classes when it starts the job or when it starts up? Or
It loads Rails when it starts up, and then when it loads the job set when it's assigned.
okay.
Um,
So
just
what
depends
happens when
on
you
the
have, like deploy a new version in your job?
Yeah, see that's another like big problem we have with Background.rb, but I actually know where we are now.
The answer to that is if we didn't do anything, it would still keep, because it's running. It's a process that's running,
Right.
right? And if you say you redefine an existing one, a job from say you ran test job set,
Right.
the new class definition won't get loaded, right?
Yeah, because it's already.
Let's say you have like but job set or something like that, right? And you've never run that before, and then you add it in or whatever, then it will get loaded.
Although it gets odd if you're using like Capistrano to deploy, and you're deploying your revisions like to
Right.
directories, your stuff's executing out of there, and it's not like living in a symlink. It's not going to reevaluate that symlink. So even if you deploy new code and then try to run it, it would be there after.
So,
You could probably.
is it? So is it? I imagine you need somebody like flushing all the workers.
Yeah, we
or
sort of take
restarting
a
all
harder line approach. Just restarting stuff.
You could probably use. Doesn't Rails already have like something that's like reloadable or whatever?
It does. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's
we've
a little
been
too.
around.
It was a little too magical for us. We were like,
Yeah.
I think it's deprecated in 1.2 anyway.
yeah,
So
like they changed the way their
yeah,
module
so-
loading
yeah.
works anyway. So yeah,
Yeah.
we were a little nervous
So
about it. And we
we-
came up with a relatively easy brute force scheme of just killing shit.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this again. That made us feel much more comfortable. So talk. Does everybody ever?
Yeah.
Does everybody use DRB?
Well, yeah,
I have.
Does anybody, do you guys know about it or?
In
little bit.
general terms.
Yeah.
DRB's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm just going to talk about this really briefly and give you like a little tiny demonstration of, it's completely unrelated to our project except for the fact that Foreman uses DRB, but so just forget about everything Foreman for a second. But DRB stands for Distributed Ruby, and so the way I think of it is that you've got like a machine right here and you're running Ruby on it, and you instantiate a Ruby object. And basically what DRB gives you is it allows you to network that object. So it's really awesome. So you got a networked object, and then you're on another machine, and you're like, hey, I want to talk to that object, and you can talk to that object. So
But it's really easy compared to every other like
incredibly easy.
PC scheme. It's really easy.
Do you have to? I mean, my main experience with that is like Java RMI stuff, where you have to
Yeah.
have like the class definitions on both machines, or
Yeah,
get into
no.
crazy class loaders that enter back and forth.
I think it is
Okay.
like sort of based off of that, but it's like
It is, but it's easier.
yeah, I haven't.
It's
I
gotta
haven't
be easier.
I haven't,
I haven't
haven't played with
used
that.
Java.
Okay.
But the way I've heard people compare
Right.
the two is that it's like that the Ruby version is just super easy.
Because
so.
Ruby's so reflective
Yeah.
and dynamic, and you can tell a lot about a class without having to have its definition.
Right.
So we got two things. We got a DRB server and a DRB client, and this is actually like even more complicated than it actually is to actually implement. So, but if you want to run a DRB server and you just start up the DRB server and it starts up another thread running DRB in that other thread, and then you instantiate your object and you bind your object to that DRB server, and then the DRB server accepts connections from clients and responds to them, so DRB client, you basically bind you basically make a local proxy object. So say this is your server over here and this is your client over here. You make a local server, a local proxy object, and that just proxies to the remote object that's over here. And then whenever you want to talk to that object, you know, when I mean talk, you're just calling a method on that particular object. DRB just takes care of sending the message over to the remote object, and then when the remote object replies, DRB takes care of sending it back too. That's it, and it's really simple. So I'm going to show you a server and a client. It's just a time server and a time client. So it just, you know, what time is it? You know, like when you call time when you were a kid. So there's the class definition right there, just a regular.
Like if you had any class in your project that you wanted to respond to remote messages, it could, that's what you know. That's what you could use.
And then you set up a URL, you know, a URI, and then you make your, you instantiated object from the time server, and then you start the service, and you start the service on a particular URI, and you bind your object to the service.
So like DRB, when you say start service, fires off a new thread, and that thread will send messages to the object that you give it, basically.
And that's why you have to join the thread, because otherwise, if you start a server, it'll just be like, I'm running and now I'm not. You know, it'll just be done. So that's the server, and then the client is also really simple. You have to tell it where it is, where the server is, and then this is your local proxy object. You just create a DRB object and you tell it where it is. And there's only one object running on a particular URI. But if you wanted to have like 5 or 6 different things like we do, we have a bunch of workers and one manager. You can run multiple objects on, you know.
And it'll pick a random port for you.
Yeah. Like in this case, actually, it is created. The local, like this is actually running it, and it actually does. Like the client will actually have its own port. That's not really important. It'll be random. You don't see it here, and we don't need to know about it for here. But then it just loops, and here it's talking to. Now this is a local proxy object, but you just think of it as an object, right? But really, what it is a local proxy object. You're calling a method on it, and it's sending that via method missing to the remote object that's over there, and DRB just takes care of all that for you. And so, any questions before I show the demo? No. It's really simple. It's okay. So, time server. I'm just going to run that. Oh yeah, sorry. Time server, time client. Very simple. Time server, you run it, and it just sits there. And DRB is looping in the background, and then you run the time client, and it does what you would expect it to do, which is just the time client is just talking to the time server the other time.
And so, like you said, I mean, this doesn't have any idea what the hell time server is. It doesn't care when you bind to it. It's just saying whatever method you invoke, it's going to serialize it, and send it over the wire, and it's going to forward it to your class, and it better respond to it. If it doesn't, raise an exception. Just like it would.
And this would actually be a good topic for another class, another session or whatever, because there are a lot more things that you can do with DRB. Like there's things like, do you send the whole entire object over the wire, or do you just send like a reference to it? And there's this thing called Rinda. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's basically like a way to, instead of having to specify where, on the simplest level, instead of having to specify where the object is, like the URI, you can just kind of call out to the network and say, hey, what objects are available for me? And the ring server is what it's called, will respond back.
It's like
I think there's a
Java
there's
there's a variety of things that exist.
And then you can do all sorts of other like distributed computing kind of things, but it's sort of
DRB is really cool and it's so easy to use.
yeah.
But
It
you
does
notice like performance is like
Well,
Okay, we haven't really hammered it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like
Good,
most
I
like
think.
Ruby stuff, you know, you just
Right.
sort of just
Yeah,
put
see
some
what-
boxes at it.
Yeah.
How's that Rubinius going?
Yeah, I mean, I think reasonable. You know.
Yeah.
Seems fast to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
never know.
I mean, just speaking from, again, the Java, it always you start to run into, once you're making method calls across the wire instead of locally, right?
oh yeah, no, I mean, they're
orders
definitely
making
gonna
slower,
be,
and
yeah,
start
they're
getting
definitely
network
gonna have
failures
huge,
and
huge
stuff.
performance implications. But
So, and it's kind of, I'm assuming DRB under the hood must, if something goes wrong with the, on the network layer, start throwing its own
oh yeah, it
exceptions
throws.
and
I
stuff,
mean,
right?
that's what
So
we have to handle stuff like that because
Okay.
you know
Yeah.
we'll talk about it later. So like. So
Well,
that's how it
yeah.
works so far, and like some interesting problems that came up immediately. Because like the stuff we described before, you know, sharing rocket science, it's not hard to come up with those objects. But then as soon as it's done, we're like, okay, well now what happens? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is like, how does a manager know about workers, and how do workers know how to talk to their manager? Because in all of our diagrams, we just magically knew how to talk to each other.
We code in diagrams.
Yeah.
We don't really use Ruby.
And then you have stuff like, what if a manager dies or a worker dies? And then what do you do if you need to deploy new job set code? So the first thing, like having workers and managers find each other, we settled on the manager DRB port is hard-coded in a config file. We're just by default using port 4444 local, I think right now, because we're not scaling to multiple machines. And then every 30 seconds, every worker has a thread that every 30 seconds reaches out and says, hi, and the manager just uses that to keep its list. If it hears from you, it'll assume you're good. So what if they die? Well, anytime a manager sends any message to a worker, it actually sends, before it even talks to DRB, we wrote our own proxy before the DRB proxy. It rescues DRB errors, so if it says, hey worker, run this job, or whatever, and it can't talk to it, it just goes, man, who cares? You're off my list, and just forgets about it. And if the worker really crashed or died, you're fine because it's gone. It won't cause problems. But if it was like a network flap or something, it'll just heartbeat in again. Like say the network's down for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes and 30 seconds, the worker's like, hi. And the manager's like, oh, hey, new guy. You're on my list. And if a worker crashes while it's running a job, we have a little sweeper that goes through and makes sure that every worker that's running a job is still reachable. And if it's not, it reschedules the job to run on somebody else. And what if the manager dies? Just start up a new one. And so, like, if you restart the manager, the list of workers that it knows about goes away. But within 30 seconds, they should have all sent a heartbeat and said hello, and it's like, oh, okay, now I know about you. And the data that you do need to be persistent, like which jobs are running on which workers, it persists in the database or in SQLite. And when a worker is sitting out there, like, trying to say, like, I'm done, or I'm heartbeating, or whatever, and it can't reach the manager, it just retries forever. It just rescues the exception and retries forever. Your manager isn't coming back up, you can manually kill your workers. We used to have them automatically die, but it didn't really make any sense. You just kill them. Like, there's no reason to like stop working.
They're not gonna like give their work to like a
Yeah.
competing company
Yeah,
or something.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Or start doing ghost jobs and stuff.
Yeah, they're not gonna like make up things.
Because they don't want to talk to the database.
Yeah, because they're really stupid. That's the best part. So then the hardest thing that we worked through was how to start new code, how to push new code live without having to do something that we were afraid of, like deal with a module like reloadable or like undefining constants, which I think is what Rails does to reload stuff. So we sort of chickened out. We came up with something sort of simple, and so if you think of this little diagram, we have a manager, 2 workers that are doing something that could take hours for all we know, and then 1 worker that's sitting there doing nothing. And if you wanted to load new code, you wouldn't want to touch the 2 that are working because they're busy, but you wouldn't want to wait for them to be done to change the 3rd one that's ready, because let's face it, we could be doing stuff right now. So what we came up with is the idea of a version key that that the manager has and every worker has. When the worker gets started, it has a key that we're storing in a file right now, and it's just a UUID, although it's just a string. It could be anything. And anytime a worker talks to a manager, it sends that version key along. And if the manager's version key doesn't match with the worker, the manager goes, I don't want you anymore. Kill yourself and I'll start a replacement for you. So you just deploy your new code, restart the manager with the new version key,
And when every time that a worker comes back and is like, I'm done running a job, or I'm heartbeating in, I'm not busy, it'll be like, kill yourself, and it'll start a replacement. And so a little illustration of that is, let's pretend green was a version key, because you're on LSD, and you can see version keys as colors. You restart your manager, and it's running the new code, like even if you updated Foreman itself.
And it has the new blue version.
Yeah, the version key is now blue. That ready guy is going to heartbeat in with green, and the manager's going to go, eh, and it tells it to kill itself, and as soon as the worker's in a state where it's cleaned up or whatever, it just exits the process, and manager starts a new worker. But these two, the busy ones, aren't going to get killed because they're busy.
So does the manager actually start up the new process?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
What is some
we're
different
sort of that's evolved.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially with the multi-machine thing.
We started off with like the one machine model, and we had the manager restarting it, but then obviously
Just calling the init
Yeah.
script, like literally just running a script
Just
Foreman.
Yeah,
Like start a worker.
we now have like a agent thing. So you'll have one agent per machine. And the agent's really dumb, and pretty much all it's supposed to do is
It'll run the init script.
the manager will say, hey, I need you to start a new one. The workers themselves, like the green one right here, when the manager tells it, if you go back a step or whatever, it's right here pretty much. The manager says, hey, you're done with. Then the worker will kill itself.
Yeah,
But
it sends
what's
a
that
message
thing?
to the worker saying die, and the worker
Says,
the
okay.
worker just has a thread. It's like, all right, fine, and it exits. And that's the fact that we were able to do this is based solely on the fact that we kept these objects as stupid as possible. And so anyway, you can see how the rest of this little thing would play out. This one finishes its job and says I'm done. So
And 2 hours later.
yeah, an hour later, this one finishes its job. And in the meantime, those blue ones could have been assigned jobs and be working.
And you'll notice that in this case, you're always going to have
The same number of workers.
3 workers. Like you're not going to like say, okay, well I've got a new version, and so I'm going to start 20 new workers because then all the memory would get sucked up.
Yeah, I wanted to do that. Jason said that was dumb. He was right.
What's
I was like, let's just start the same number. Whatever's running, just start that. But that would kill the machine if you were busy. It lets you push it.
How do you know that it's time to create a new version key?
Well, like that's sort of up to the human at this point. We would guess you'd automate in Capistrano. We haven't automated it yet, but like if you're deploying code and it hasn't changed or whatever, you don't have to really touch it. It's basically when you decide that you want to restart things, it's a decision you would consciously make.
Yeah.
It seems like in any large-size project, it's going to be easier to just always restart it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have classes change all over the place.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to track
exactly.
it. So.
And because it's so stupid,
Yeah,
the
it's
process,
easy to do.
we wanted something that was really reliable and easy to debug, and it's just like, oh.
Is it tied to the same number of restarts in the manager? Like, would it make sense that if every time the manager starts up, it creates a new random key? And so
Well,
then,
we wanted it to if you haven't deployed code, and for any say you have some poorly trained sysadmin who's like, this machine's overloaded, I need to kill this crazy process.
Yeah.
And you're like, you can get over it. You want to be able to start it up without having to replace all your workers because they're fine.
Okay.
That
We
could
really
probably-
in our brain we thought of it as you cat deploy,
Yeah, you have to play, and then you write Capistrano recipe or whatever that will
Generate them?
generate a new key. But we didn't want to bake that in quite yet. I mean, we could add it as an option, or you can.
Yeah, basically, if
something
anybody
in
ever
your
wants to use
scripts.
it, they want it to work a certain way.
We're definitely starting off more manual at first and seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even think about that really.
Yeah, that's-
I mean, I think we were just kind of like, it's got a version key.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, now we're gonna change it. We go in and manually change it.
Yeah.
So.
What do you guys use to daemonize the manager process? Do you just Control Z it or what?
No, he did it. You used the same guy who wrote Slave, which is what Background.rb uses, wrote library before that. I don't know
No
what it's
idea
called.
about that. I don't think.
Yeah.
There's
This is a demonized module or something.
look at
right?
Slave uses.
Background.rb uses slaves.
No, but they also use demons. I think.
Yeah, they use them both.
So demons is basically like a demonizer. You can add it in and it'll do. I mean, it does lots of stuff, but it sort of does. I tried to use it, and it sort of does too much stuff, and I wanted more control over it, like where you could put PID files and stuff like that. So it's pretty heavily based off of that actually.
Oh, it's not in here. Oh, it's in like the script or something.
Because one of the things that happened when I was
it's demonizer helper.
a side effect that I didn't want when I tried to use Daemonizer or Daemonize, whatever, the library, is that it closes.
Demons or Daemonize?
Daemons, I think. Is that it closes all open file handles when you fork off something, and that was causing me like a lot of problems.
Why would it do that?
I don't know. I couldn't think of a reason.
Because you want to be able to exit from the shell. So if you start,
if you try to quit bash, it's waiting for the file handle.
It's waiting for the file handle to close. Yeah.
So yours doesn't, like it'll just sit there and not control it.
What's that? No, it does. No, it does close file handles. It's if you want to look at it.
So you wrote this yourself? I thought you stole this from someone.
No, yeah, look.
So something that could.
Oh yeah, you did steal this from someone.
So it's like based off of.
I would think so.
Oh, this is part of the Demons Library written by Thomas Mueller.
Yeah.
Oh, see, now I don't actually. When you ask me, is it Daemon? Wait, what are the two options?
Daemonize is really kind of stripped down, kind of.
Okay.
And then there's Daemons, which does like all sorts of other stuff. Like it does PID files, and like I think Daemonize is like.
I don't actually know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's whatever one.
I think
one background.
I think they both do
uses.
actually.
Really?
I'm pretty sure they both do.
But this is the one we used.
Yeah, you can see the.
Now you wrote this or somebody else?
No,
wrote it?
Well, what I did is I took it and I pasted it in, and then I started fucking with it. So that's why I included the license in there.
Oh, got it.
So I mean, I got really sort of intimate
The way
with it for a while.
wastes an afternoon.
Yeah. And it's okay. I don't know if it's good. One of the things that sucks about the way I did it, for whatever reason, is that quick restart sort of fucks up, and I'm not exactly sure why it does it. But
where you say stop and then start right on?
if you just do an immediate, so I have to look into that.
I tried just forking and I got really confused and stuff.
Why was it causing? Because if you think about it, right, your file handle shouldn't be opened until you're actually like creating the job, right? So you have the worker that started and it's not doing anything.
Yeah, it had something to do with, and it also like would close the database connection too. I don't know. There's something about like that it worked exactly in like the default configuration of background.rb, but then I wanted to do it slightly different, and it was causing a lot of problems. I don't exactly remember though.
Well, I know that.
I remember when I kicked it out.
I know,
It was horrible.
Yeah, I know that from working with background.rb that you can have lots of really weird and like strange and confusing bugs. I mean, probably encountered some of the weirdest bugs from that. It's just like, why is that happening? So that doesn't surprise me.
Right.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's often like really hard to explain or figure out, or
Right.
So
Yeah, it's really detailed.
so yeah, I don't this will close file handle. So see if it causes problems.
Yeah. But anyway, that's our thing.
Just throw it out there. I'm a really big fan of daemon tools, and just like it's written by DJB, the guy who wrote Qmail and DJ.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. The config, it's a steep learning curve, kind of like VI, but I found it to be. I mean, once you get it up and running, it's really stable. I mean, I use it for a lot of things.
Is that Ruby or is that like?
It's C.
That was written in C.
Yeah, but I mean, you write a run. Just like any script. I mean, it could even be like just a script that calls Ruby. I mean, you just start anything up like you would run it from the command line.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if people are interested, I mean, I
Does it have like
Yeah.
that might be good. Does it have like PID files or something like?
No, it doesn't. But what's really nice is that you put the run files typically in like /etc, like I run like a DNS cache, and so I'll put that in /etc/DNS cache. And you could put configuration information like just a simple like one-line run thing in there, but then you symlink it into a /services, and so within Unix or Linux, it creates I think they're called named pipes or something, but they're actual pipes into the program that exist in the file system, and so any kind of signal that you want to send it, there's these tools like SVC, stands for service. Like if you want to send something a SIG-HUP, you do svc-h for the hub signal,
Okay.
and then /services/DNS cache.
Yeah. So that's how you avoid
Yeah.
using PIDs. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always in that standard place.
Huh, that could be useful. I mean, that could be like a better implementation almost of how to do it if I can get the restart thing to
Yeah, I mean,
be fixed.
it inserts itself into the init tab, so it's actually watched by process ID 1 of init. So if it ever crashes for whatever reason, which I've never encountered, it will restart it. And so all the processes that exist ultimately have process 1 as the parent.
Yeah, it works really well for like the Linux environments where like, cause have you guys used like LaunchD much too? Cause I
feel like I've used that.
it's built into OS X, and that's what I use to like manage to like watch my like my Rails server if I'm running it on a Mac, and it's kind of the same thing too, where it's like if it dies, it'll start it back up, and it's super reliable.
Oh,
But,
is that like the cron replacement thing? Or is
Yeah.
that like,
Yeah,
it's like their
yeah.
master launcher thing.
Yeah, it's got cron and like
yeah.
also like daemon tools, like it'll watch process and stuff. But daemon tools is a lot more cross-platform, and you can run it in like all your Linux servers or whatever. LaunchD is it's open source, but nobody's ported it to Linux that I know of. So
Well, Ubuntu has what are you doing?
I forget. Something similar.
Xinit or something.
No,
What was Upstart?
Upstart.
Where'd that come
Yeah,
from?
no, totally Upstart. And they basically said, oh,
Didn't they rip off?
no, they were like, well, we've pretty much already written it, or we're gonna almost have it done, and then Apple released LaunchD. So if they released it earlier, we would have just used that, but they didn't, and so the result is that ours is better. Because like that's ours does more stuff. So yeah.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
I mentioned this briefly before, but I just want to compare these two architectures. I'm wondering if I would miss something. Like if I were, well, I probably still have it in the CVS archive somewhere. This is before Subversion, but some process like this where there's like a centralized manager. I guess we'll just like using the same language, like manager and workers. I guess rather than pushing to the workers,
Doing a poll.
yeah, and basically setting up so that it seems like there are possibly less moving parts because you don't have heartbeats. So basically just the manager sits here with a stack of queues, and then the workers run and just say, give me a job, and then it grabs it, and once it's done, it submits back any information that it needs to, and then just grabs another job.
Okay, well, so I actually did argue for that, and they argued against it and won. So at some point you have to have something that's smart, that's looking at the database, because in our like one of the things we want to be able to do is track jobs, like their statuses, like when they started, when they finished. So we decided to use a database for that. So I mean, maybe that's a poor choice or something. We think it's a good one, but maybe we'll.
No, I agree. I mean, but MySQL, I mean, that's optimized for that.
Yeah, we might, I mean, it's not like MapReduce, but so you have to have something that's smart. So you have to have like, basically, I mean, you can think for, yeah, I mean, just say you put something out there like a sun, whatever, it's sitting there, and it can like it can maybe like it can dump like everything into memory from like the database. It can say dump like 500 jobs, the first 500 recent jobs into memory. So it's sitting there, it's a DRB object, and then you got all your workers sitting out here, and they're gonna just go to this like central place on the network and start grabbing jobs from that, right? So so you have to have something smart. I guess, yeah, I mean, you could do that. One of the things one advantage of that approach would be that you don't have to just have one that has like a repository or whatever. You could have like several job listings. Yeah, we just didn't choose that route.
But I think too, it depends on your workload. Like if you're optimized for far more tasks than you have computing resources available to it, it's easier to dole out the work as it finishes. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we didn't think about it enough.
What was your big argument?
How to find out?
You don't remember?
Whatever he says, I say the opposite, and then see what happens.
Yeah,
But-
you still have to have something that's smart.
It depends on if your jobs are also like approximately equal in terms of size and resources, right? If you're gonna
Yeah.
have differently sized stuff and want to send it different places, then your model seems like it
Yeah.
would work better, right?
One of the let's see, pushing jobs versus pulling jobs. I mean, the manager. One of the things that it's going to be doing is the graceful restarting, right? So you have to have an idea of the number of workers on a machine. So if they're pulling, you still have to have something that's looking out and seeing how many there are.
Yeah, thinking how my brain works, I think I convinced him by telling him that something had to be smart. Let's make the workers as stupid as possible
Yeah.
and make all the smarts in the manager. I don't know whether that actually made any sense, but that's probably what I.
You still, actually, that is, you still have to make this thing kind of smart, right? Because it has to be able to talk to the database. It has to be able to suck in jobs and put them into memory, making a list, an internal list of jobs. And then when you have 5 different workers contacted at once, it has to be smart enough to mutex it, at a mutual exclusion lock.
Yeah.
Synchronize it so that you don't, so that you can't, two
Each
things
job
can't
goes to one
right.
place, yeah.
you can't grab the job and like corrupt the internal array or whatever, hash or whatever it is that you're using to store your jobs. So that thing does have to be smart, and I think with that thing being smart, we're just like, we'll just push them all out.
Can I address how I address that?
Oh, hell yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Manager was basically it was a MySQL database, and there was a table called ticker. And so it just had an ID, which is auto increment, and then another column that was ID, that was an integer that stood for it could be the IP address, say, of the machine. So it's just something uniquely that each worker would uniquely identify itself. And then any other notes it wanted, but those were just those 2 key columns. So it would connect via the MySQL connection and insert its IP address into that table.
The worker would?
Yes.
Okay.
And then it would get, and then there's the MySQL call to get the last ID. So it actually got the auto incremented ID. And so that would be like its ticker. So it's kind of like when you go to the grocery store, like it's like you take a number. That's like what happened. It took a number.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now it uses that to, like, if it wants to grab jobs at a time, like in this case I was sending out, like, say 10 million emails. So it would grab as many emails that the worker knew, or it knows itself, like how much it can grab. So it uses that ticker to reserve emails by doing an update. So it basically does, like, there's another table, it's just like a table of emails. So it would use that ticker and it would update. It would get the emails in 2 calls. The first call would be an update, so that it would update a certain ticker column wherever it was null, and then the second call, it would then grab the rows where the ticker equaled that.
Right.
Equal the one pulling.
It equaled
It'd be like-
the ticker. Like if you got
Yeah, like if I'm 3, it'd be like send them all to 3, and then
Right.
grab the ones that are 3.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
then you can't, because you're letting MySQL lock the table when you're doing the update.
Yeah, well, but there's actually no table. Like, that was the nice thing about it, is that you didn't have to do any table locks.
Well,
what are
yeah,
the-
because you're just if it didn't update
So
that
let's
row, you're
start
not going to get it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, one of the arguments is that I mean, unless we wanted to do, unless we didn't want to use Active Record, because Active Record is kind of huge. So in that case, the worker would have to load Active Record to be able to talk to the database.
Or do
Unless-
raw MySQL.
if we did raw
tied to the
MySQL,
database.
Right.
And like we rewritten this thing like 4 times, and we were like, no raw MySQL. So that was sort of like out of the question. So then it's like, okay, well, we've got Active Record in here, but if it's got Active Record, then it's sort of too big. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think actually, like your approach is sort of more, it can be more efficient about it, but I guess we don't really need that at the moment. We haven't, like, we barely, hit this thing hard. So, and we're not even sure. That's sort of like the premature optimization thing. I think we just chose one route, and I think either route would probably
yeah,
work
we
okay.
would totally have been like, oh, this didn't work. Try the other one. But it ended up working.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, we completely could have gone the other way too. And I think, and that's actually how MapReduce, I think, works. Is they sort of have the poll type of approach, but they sort of have like you know, you have your sort of central repository of jobs, like in your case it's the MySQL database, in our case too, but they'll put that out, you know, anywhere. Like you can have multiple ones of those, and so you have 1,000 workers right here that are talking to this repository, and 1,000 workers over here that are talking to this repository. And they do the whole thing, and I think they probably voted a lot better than us. So
That's possible.
yeah.
Anyway, it's on Ruby Forge if anybody wants to play with it.
Awesome.
Anybody can have commit access. My mom.
I have a silly question. How did you guys do the syntax highlighting?
Oh, I googled for it. It was awesome. What did I Google?
Because I was trying to do that too.
I thought to myself too. I was like, "What are the odds?" The first hit on Google will be the thing that I want. Let's try it. I think it was Keynote syntax highlight.
Do you just export it as HTML from TextMate and then copy it in Safari?
No, it's even easier. Check this out.
Okay.
You go into TextMate, you find the crap you want to highlight, and then so you.
Make sure it's saved as a project. Make sure you know.
Oh, I think you're making that up.
I don't know. I've been.
So you did this, right?
Yeah.
Boom. So then you get some HTML, and then from within TextMate, show
This
this.
is HTML that it just generated, and then
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
And you can just copy it?
so that's
Paste.
That's just
Work,
HTML
totally works.
preview,
Isn't that
right?
crazy?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Then paste
Yeah.
it into
Because I hadn't even thought of that. I was like, oh, we should paste the code, and I was like, oh, how do people do that? It seems like such a pain.
I was thinking screenshots. That's what I was thinking originally. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't, you know.
Well, I didn't think other people had done that, so I'm sure it possibly.
Yeah, no, I know. I just didn't think we'd have enough time.
The second Google key notes.
Oh yeah, we don't have to wire this if you're not.
Oh yeah. It comes up. No. Funny. Anyway, so that's that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that we would use that for, maybe I told you this last time, is because all our pages are served by Yahoo right now, so we only have static pages. So like right now our pages are generated by Rails, but what I want to do is download the pages as static pages, images, CSS, JavaScript, everything, and then we're gonna FTP it up to a server.
Yeah.
Because we can't have like Rails cached or whatever, and on Yahoo especially. Yeah. So one of the things I want to use Background.rb for is, is basically like, so from the web interface you can say, okay, publish the site, and then it'll spawn off workers that will like, basically you generate like 100 URLs. It's actually like tens of thousands, but let's say 100 URLs, and then you give this worker 10, this worker 10, this worker 10, and then they all download it and then copy it up to like to central folders.
So they're all downloading, like this worker over here is downloading 10 different URLs.
Right.
And then uploading.
Yeah, and they all load it off of like the live Rails server basically, and then they copy the files to like a static folder, and then but basically what I want to know is like specifically like what URLs are being generated, how far along like the tasks as a whole are. If somebody fails, I want to retry it, because like in that case we can't just have like a worker that just like skips out on his partition. Like.
So what happens if so the first thing I would say is that you want to write the code so that if you redo, like say you get through, say you have a group of 10 URLs and like only 3 of them complete,
right,
you want to make sure that you can do them all over again. Like
Yeah.
the first 3, if you do them again, that's not going to mess things up.
Exactly.
So
This might work for
yeah,
you. I don't know.
Yeah.
because if a job doesn't complete, so what it doesn't have right now is it doesn't have, so say you have like a 2-hour job, and you actually have like a status counter inside your job set.
Right.
It's just like, I'm 1% done, I'm 2% done.
Right.
We don't have any facility for getting that information out.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be like rocket
I don't know how
science,
Background.rb
but-
does that too, because you think like if the worker is like working,
They do it
like the worker doesn't really even have threads.
No, the workers are threaded, and then
Really?
but they also have those separate workers for results. I don't know about the progress crap. They have that separate worker
the
that just
progress
stores
is-
results, but it's not. It's a hash, but it's not a hash. And
Yeah, but
everybody
you
always
don't
does
have
go
to
crazy.
use it. That's the thing.
No, you can
The
talk
progress-
directly
you can talk to
a worker,
a worker
sort of,
on a separate.
through a proxy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the way it works is like you get the
I've done it. I just don't know
Version
how
key?
it works.
yeah,
you
so you
have
get the
worker
version
The
key.
job.
Yeah.
So the version key is
The job-
basically
job.
sorry, job key.
Yeah.
So can I draw this?
Yeah.
Because I know how this works actually. So because it's the easiest way. So it's pretty simple. So it's job key points to a DRB URI, which points to.
But the DRB URI is on the.
It's
is
like
on the.
it's like the middleman. or
Yeah,
whatever.
the middleman object has a hash of DRB URI to worker to actual.
I think this is, tell me if I'm doing this wrong, but to a worker proxy, which then points to a
Middleman.
DRB URI, effectively. I mean, there's a middleman in there, but
Yeah, it gets the worker proxy.
there's
from
there,
the
yeah, there's
middleman
like a
based on the
middleman in
job.
here
So the
somewhere,
middleman returns a worker proxy.
which then
What?
points to the real
The real object.
the real
In your-
worker, I guess I'll say.
Yes.
So the idea is though that if you what's that? Oh, okay. So the idea is basically, well, what happens if the real worker dies, and you want to be able to like get to the results. Well, in that case, the real worker's dead, but you've already when you give it, you basically have a job key. That's your handle into the job, and so you're like, give me the results that belong to this job key, basically. So when you go to the worker proxy will know that the real worker's dead, and it will then go to like the results hash or whatever. I think that's kind of how it
Yeah,
works. Did I do that bad? It's sort of.
It's really
Yeah,
confusing.
yeah, that works if you use the results. Maybe does each worker run in its own DRB server? Because I thought it was just the middleman. I thought it was like the middleman was like the gateway into the DRB server, and all the workers run like within that.
No, they're
Yeah.
separate.
Each one
processes,
is-
each runs a
It
little.
used to
So
be that
each
way.
one must
Yeah, it
have
used to
all
be.
of Rails.
Yeah,
Well, you can
Yeah,
do
each worker.
Yeah, you can do a Rails worker, or you can do a non-Rails worker.
Yeah, I need
but
Rails
they are
workers.
forking process. They used to just do a thread,
Yeah.
and people liked it.
How do they avoid? I've been in this code for like a month. I think I know this, but how do they avoid like the URL collisions? Like, as if it just is like localhost port whatever.
Oh,
I think
DRB
that
will randomly
DRB just
choose
does that for
ports
you.
for you. If
Okay.
you don't if you specify 0, I think
Yeah, that's
it
what they
actually
do.
tests
Oh.
for open
Yeah, they
source.
specify 0.
Yeah, it tests
Except
whether the port
for
is-
except for they're using DRB Unix or DRB Unix. So they're
Yeah,
using
Oh yeah,
sockets.
they're using Unix sockets instead.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
the
Instead of
middleman
TCP.
is
Oh, so it
networked.
doesn't even
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, the middleman is networked with TCP/IP, but internally you got all these processes, all these worker processes, and they're all using sockets to communicate with the middleman,
Right.
which you then communicate to. So I could draw that too.
No.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But
So
thank
our
you.
thing, if
No.
you wanted to be like, are you 97% done or 96% done? It's bad for that.
Yeah.
We'd love to hack it in, I guess, but
Although
it is good for like, are you done or are you not? Did you break or did you work?
Yeah, see, I think
It's
that's
good for that.
I think that's just the one thing that would hold me back from using that. Is just being able to know. Because what I wanted to do ideally is have a worker. So the middleman spawns a manager, and then the manager spawns other workers.
we tried that.
That's how we started.
But DRB, like background
Well,
RB,
what
just
happens?
like
You get,
crafts
you
out
get
when
a
you try to do that.
what's the error?
Recycled object.
Recycled object. You ever get that error? Boy,
I don't know.
We would have gotten that eventually, for
Yeah.
sure.
When you
Because
start having a DRB
Yeah.
object, try and create another DRB object.
Is that a
Well,
DRB limitation or,
No, it's a
or
slave
background
limitation.
DRB? Oh, okay.
so you got middleman right here, which has like TCP, IP, DRB, I guess I'll say,
Yeah.
and that's so that's how you know if you're inside Rails, I guess, and you want to talk to it, that's how you talk to it, right?
Right.
But then you have your worker 1, worker 2, and so on and so forth. And so,
And they're all separate.
but these are socket
Right.
DRB.
Right.
Like that.
And you wanted the worker to like make them.
And so, and this is socket DRB, I guess. And this is how these guys talk to each other. So if you wanted to make, say, a manager worker, and you wanted it to be able to, like, I don't know, talk to
Right.
other workers or whatever, or like
Right.
talk back, basically, but you're gonna have to talk to the middleman to have it start a new worker over here. And how are you gonna talk to it? Like, you're gonna
Yeah.
talk to it to the socket, and it's just, it gets like,
How come you can't create another one through the socket? Like, isn't the manager worker just its own process? Why can't it get?
At some point, we thought we knew why, but now we forget. So.
yeah,
When we started this crap, we just thought like, well, background RB works. We just need to stick a job queue on top of it,
Right.
and we beat on that for about 3 weeks, and then
we ended up making a completely separate middleman just dedicated to the manager.
Okay.
And then using
Yeah.
that to talk to this middleman to start up new workers.
But it didn't work.
I just reduced it down to 1 worker. I was like,
Yeah.
like, I don't need 10 workers right now. I was like, I'll just use 1.
So one of the limitations of this that our thing doesn't have a problem with is that this is socket-based
Right.
DRB, so you actually cannot start. You can't start inside of here TCP/IP DRB. And I have no idea how they did it over there. But whenever we tried to start TCP/IP, like if you actually try to do start service, it's effectively overriding the primary server, the DRB primary server.
Right.
And then you get these like recycled object errors, and it's like all screwed up.
And so like being able to talk directly to one of our workers, all you really need is the URI.
Right.
You
It's
just-
already
you-
networked,
like it's
yeah.
it's already there. We just don't have any facility for doing that the way Background.rb did. But presumably we would just have a job object that would.
Is it in the database?
No,
actually?
we could store it. Is what I'm saying.
It's
We
not?
just I don't. Oh shit! If I didn't work on one.
I think
But-
No, you can work on
I think probably the most like deathly thing about Background.rb for me is that I haven't reached any problem that's insurmountable.
Like you haven't been able to give up.
Yeah, like exactly. Like I'll spend a day and I'll actually fix it. But then that just makes me wake up the next day and be like, all right, sweet, I think I got it today. I think I got it today.
That's really funny. That's a good point. We have to watch out for
There's a lot of hair pulling, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but
But-
yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and be like, oh yeah, I talked to those guys, but I really do think I almost have it. So like, I'm gonna keep working on it because I spent so much time on it. But